Hi, everyone, and welcome. So, why do we humans, not everywhere, not in every country, not in every culture, but why do in most countries, especially in the so called Western countries, why do we insist on waging war on ourselves? And by that, I mean by waging war on illness and on our bodies. It doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? And why do we do it? We do it because we do not want to take responsibility for our own health and for our own life. We wish to continue with a diet that is not just depleting and unhealthy, but a diet which completely and totally leads us to and supports illness. It means we would have to change this. And we have been so programmed by television ads, by radio ads, by billboards, by schools, by so many corporations who have taken over pretty much the government, and that we have actually succumbed to diets that the body does not respond to putting things in our body to appease our taste buds and to focus on not feeling and stuffing ourselves instead of taking charge of our health. So we wage war on illness because we do not want to be responsible for our health. So that we can continue with what we've been eating, which are processed things. I don't even call them foods. Sugars that have absolutely no reason to be in our body whatsoever. By eating fats, certain fats that the body doesn't know what to do with it, actually. Our human body doesn't know what to do with them because they are not made for the human body. And we also do it by also eating things that are very low in fiber and leads to gut inflammation. And we then tell ourselves that the inflammation is what's causing the illness and the disease. You'll hear a lot of people on mainstream media talking about inflammation causing all the illness and the pain and the disease, but that's not true. It is not the inflammation that's caused it. The inflammation is the product of our lifestyle. It is actually a gift. It's telling us that something is wrong. I'm now going to be inflamed because I need your attention and you've not been paying attention. But we do not wish to change our lifestyle, which means our diet. We are so connected with chronic stress. We are so incredibly stressed out because stress and anxiety are things which are accepted right now. Amazing that stress, internal stress, external stress, and anxiety are acceptable now. We don't even see it anymore as a sign that we're out of balance. So stress, but here's the problem, stress and anxiety, they increase stomach acid, which disrupt our gut motility and weaken the gut barrier function. This is why this will eventually lead to things like Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, illnesses like this. And then we say, oh, our body, something is wrong with the body. Something is not wrong with the body. It's our lifestyle that's the problem. We also create these worn illnesses and on our bodies because we do not realize that our overuse of NSAIDs is not the responsible thing to do. And this is a problem with the society that we live in, that we think if we take in all of these frequent use of anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen, which causes the gut lining damage, which causes ulcers and causes bleeding, we think that is the solution. No, that is not the solution at all. We also have been subjected to thinking that we need antibiotics. So we find that there's a huge problem in many societies for human beings right now with antibiotic overuse. And this is the frequent or necessary use of antibiotics. What do? They not just kill the germs that we think are the cause of the illness, but they're killing the beneficial gut bacteria, leading to dysbiosis and increased infection risk. So the very thing we're taking for an infection, to stop an infection, if we overuse it, which most of us do, they actually are causing more infections. Isn't that interesting, though? Most people are not even realizing that a lot of our illnesses have to do with lack of sleep. So poor sleep disrupts the gut-brain axis, and it also impairs digestion and weakens the immune system. Yes, lack of sleep weakens the immune system. So we find that also sedentary lifestyle is what we need if we're going to wage war on anything. And I just not into waging war, but if we're going to do that, then it needs to be on a sedentary lifestyle, because we are, first of all, smoking decreases saliva. Did you know that? Those of you who smoke, or if you know somebody who smokes, it decreases their saliva. Saliva we need to digest all sugars. So if you do not chew well, you won't digest the sugars because you need the saliva. If you smoke, you won't have enough saliva at all in your body. And so smoking both decreases the saliva and harms the stomach lining, which increases acid production, which then weakens the esophageal sphincter and increases inflammation. So a lot of people say they smoke because they're stressed out, but actually they're creating stress internally now in their bodies by smoking. And our sedentary lifestyle means we sit a lot. We're constantly sitting, some of us, our whole work, for our work hours, the hours of work, we're sitting most of the time. So in addition to these problems, let's have a look at the organs that we're fighting. Now, why are we fighting these organs if we're waging war on illness and on our bodies? This is what we're fighting. In fact, so much so that some people have even had their thyroid gland removed. This is really shocking. Some people, when they're fighting their body, don't realize they're fighting the liver. The liver is where we process a lot of our emotions. If we have excess anger and it's repressed, we will have liver issues and liver problems. The great news is that the liver actually does know how to regenerate itself, and it will, but it needs first the cells that regenerate the liver, that are regenerated to build the liver, the cells also need to be healthy first. So all healing has to occur on a cellular level, not in the organ, but on the cells that build the organ. So even although the liver regenerates itself, it needs to make sure that we need to make sure we have healthy cells to regenerate a new liver. So lungs, oh my goodness, because of the constant pollution to which we're subjected, our lungs are constantly demanding our attention, and most of us do not now know what to do for our lungs. Same for the pancreas. Some people don't even know we have a pancreas. So if you put your hand by a diaphragm, you will see that a lot of our critical organs are right there by a diaphragm. This is why things like breathing exercises work so well. First of all, they calm and soothe the tension, the tightness, and also the stress of all the organs right by that area. Look how many organs we have there. Then at the back, we have the adrenal glands. And we're going to be talking about the adrenals at some time in the future because that is so critical. The kidneys are also back there. In fact, the adrenals are on top of the kidneys. Very often when people say, I have a back problem, what it actually means is that they have a problem with their kidneys and they don't even realize it. And what I would like for you to look at now too is the gallbladder and the stomach and the urethra. These are really big issues, and I don't really know how it is that this happens. But the problem is that people actually think that they can simply create war on these body parts, and that will be sufficient. Now, let's have a look at the large intestine and the small intestine. This is where most of illnesses start, is in the large intestine. Almost all disease and illness start there. And in order to address this, what we need to do is to start addressing the problems there in the intestines first. Now, what is interesting to me is when we create war and illness, almost none of the people who tell us that we need to fight disease or fight this, almost none of us at all are aware that by fighting it, we're creating more stress and we're only creating more damage to the very problems that have shown us that there's an issue there in the first place. Problems also with the bladder, the urethra, the appendix. People are actually taking out their appendix. They're actually removing them. Real huge problem. So this is something that we all need to really have a look at, and we need to start addressing in every way, shape, or form. So I want you to think about this today. Why are you deciding to fight something that you are not at all aware of because you've been taking painkillers, you've been taking medication to numb it? Why not address the issue and the problem in the first place? So here is what I'm asking for each person to do today. I want you to stop and think about all of the issues that you have ever had, whether it's, illness or not, or whether it's something that you are really wanting to address. If you find that you've got a very impacted colon, for example, and you want to address that, what do you do about that? What I want you to think about today is some of the very things that I think most people have no idea or don't even think about when it comes to their bodies. And one of the things that I want you to think about is this. Usually with all illness, the thing that's lacking the most for human beings is patience. We want to hurry up and fix it. We want to get away from the symptoms and we don't want to deal with it. The illness is here to teach us to be patient with ourselves. This is what is important, to be patient with ourselves. So you are the magic of the universe, unfolding at its own rhythm. And therefore, because of this very reason, you are able to heal. Do not believe what you've been told that you're not able to heal as well. You are, because you've got an entire universe within you that's set to do that. Remember, you're very hard to control when you're healthy. You're very hard to manipulate when you're clear. And you're very hard to influence when you're sovereign, which is why you need to stop listening to what is being fed to you in a mass production level and start taking control of your own body and taking your energies back. So before I bring Phil in, or co-host Phil, I want you to think about what Tagore said. Let us not pray to be sheltered from dangers, but to be fearless when facing them. When we find that we're ill, if we practice instead fearlessness and patience, we'll be able to address the root cause which lies within our own response to it. So I'm going to bring in Phil here. Phil, could you please let the other co-hosts know to join us here? Okay, I'm going to bring you in right now. And just unmute yourself, please, Phil, and come on in. Thank you so much for waiting.
Thank you. Yeah, I've sent a message to the others. Can you repeat the question to that, please? I think I've missed quite a chunk.
Yes. So a lot of people think that when they're ill, it's urgent that they take care of the manifestations of the illness. Whether it manifests itself as constant, tremendous migraines, whether it's something that is so painful that all they want to do is to get rid of the pain. And Tagore says, which I totally agree with, let us not pray to be sheltered from dangers, but to be fearless when facing them. And I contend that illness is an invitation to face our greatest fears. So we need to welcome it and go internally and change the way we approach illness. That's what I'm asking. What do you think of that, and how would we do that?
Yeah, I think that is the perfect thing, isn't it? we have to be brave to go within, because we clearly have, let's say, a breakdown in communication. So the only way to find out what the breakdown of communication is to go in and ask the questions, because a pill can't fix a breakdown in communication. It can't fix absorption. It can't fix a compacted colon. So we need to understand what's going on in our body. And my understanding, I've been at this 30 years, is understanding what is going on, what's going on inside of our body. So, you know, like Doreet was saying, if we've got lower back pain, kidneys, adrenals, it's always our body is in communication, dialogue with us, sharing the alarm. And the alarm normally is pain, too much acid, trauma, wrong nutrients, bad food, bad choices, negative emotions, you know, the people, the environment, everything around us is crucial to our health and well-being. And when we're out of balance, we have to look to the areas that we're out of balance in order to make those decisions of what is it that I need to do in order to create balance back in the homeostasis of my body. And that's what we're looking for, is to create a positive homeostasis in our body, so it knows what to do, and to give it the space. And this is the thing that I've learned along my journey, is we have to give our body the space and time and all the right building blocks and equipment, so to speak, so our body can get back in balance, clean itself out, and let go of what it is that's blocking it and hindering it.
Yes, and I agree with you, Phil, that all illness is actually a lack of homeostasis in the body. And so it's actually an invitation to rebuild it, because we've not been paying attention to it. So I think it's the greatest gift we could ever get. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to bring on Herb here. Herb, how would you, if you, with somebody who is persistent on fighting an illness, how would you address them?
Well, find out where are they coming from with their fight. Like you mentioned, that's the wrong approach to fight disease, to wage war. I'd say, you know, are we coming from a place of fear or come from a place of love? So rather than making war, let's make love, choose love with ourselves, and because that changes the whole dynamic of our healing. The same with inviting people to eat healthier. Do people do it out of fear? And then it's not going to be sustainable. So it's finding out where they are. And also with the fight, I think there's we can shift that, change that energy, rather than waging war or having fight towards something. Why don't we have that fight to do good? Because I see it myself in times where I found it very challenging, very difficult. It's so easy to succumb to being sedentary, like you mentioned earlier, which is one of the main diseases we have. Is have that fight, that get up and go, that drive to pull away, come away from the system. So it's offering that to others and guiding them to healthy ways, a healthy outlook and perspective of health and life.
Great. Thank you so much for that. So I'm going to ask you another question, Herb. If you just said, you know, that they need to choose love, but most people have no clue what that means. And I think that comes up even stronger when they're ill. Now there's even more self-hate, because now they think the body's turning against them. We talk about autoimmune diseases as if the body turns on itself. How do you think we can address that?
by giving examples, sharing our own story, and see the current model that we all live by is totally backwards. We know that on here. So it's an invitation to go down some rabbit holes as well. You can hold someone's hand with them to show them, look, this is an alternative. There's no pressure, but you've been, we're suffering long enough. Here's an alternative. Here's what we're not told. Here's what we're not shown. This has worked for me and many, many others. We can give examples. That's the only thing we can do, really. They have to be able to see.
So in other words, the more of us there are who do not give in to this idea that we can wage war on illness, the more of us that we show that it actually is to our detriment and there's another way. So then soon we can create a critical mass and we can change that. However, what I'm noticing, Pete, is that many people really are so not wanting to take responsibility for their health that they rather go down this rabbit hole rather than do what Herb has suggested. So how do you think we address this? And also the same question I asked Herb, if you had somebody who was really upset and really angry with their bodies for being that the body is ill, how would you address it?
Yeah, this really interesting topic. So, hi everyone. And how would you address that? I mean, we're in a very violent culture. We come into a very violent, I say, war zone. It's not to be negative. It's just to witness some of the circumstances that a lot of us are entering into. So, we shut down very early. And then, how do we know love? How do we know love? What is love? To me, we are very imprinted very early, and we just feel the field, copy, cat. And we are very energy based in terms of when we are all young. So we talk about children, but we were once children. And in my journey, it's revisiting. I've had to revisit that, not consciously. Circumstances have just manifested as I've gone on a journey cleansing, and brought me back to certain times in my life at different ages that have able to revisit and then released certain shocks and traumas. So, the root is, I would say, is one of many roots is how do we learn to love, and yes, if we research and find certain people by their actions and, what is perfect, again, no one potentially perfect. Personally, I don't want to be perfect by anyone's potential thinking of what perfect is. Excuse me that. And but we find examples, research, educate ourselves, and really have to dig deep to really even see that. So we've got to work on ourselves because our lenses are closed, So we've got to realize we're working with ingrained imprinting that an aspect of us wants to hold on to that old identity, that old pain, that old kind of war mentality. And I've seen a few movies, and it's just like, it's been such a shame that it's all. So it's such a shame that they end up, it's all about war. So it's very in our psyche, it's very in our subconscious that everything has to be a war to get some peace, and it doesn't have to be war. It can be just a whole different approach in terms of acceptance, letting go, embracing, and learning that quality of love for ourselves. So there isn't this internal war. So go back to our imprinting again. You know, most people won't go on fast, won't go on cleanses, won't change their habits because they've got this perpetual inner war going on. And most people don't want to look at their true selves because they've identified with this personality which they believe is them, which is just a construct of their environment, their mom, their dad, you know, and we can't even see it. And there is a dopamine hit in terms of drama and addictions and, you know, feeding off other people and chatting about other people. So you've got to look at many aspects, you know, and start learning to love ourselves. Yes, the more people do it, the more people who can stand strong, their roots are strong in it, because you have so much opposition. The more people like that, it's only going to, the world will be a better place, and there'll be more people, if they want to take that journey, that they can actually see people around, you know, doing that journey. And podcasts like this and people talking more about this more and more platforms where we are, let's just say, expressing how we can heal, how we can learn to love ourselves, how we can nurture. So I suppose, yeah, I'll leave it there for a minute. Got a little babble in the background.
It seems like a little war going on in the background. Sabina, thank you for that. Sabina, welcome. Sabina, have you ever experienced, especially I remembered you had set yourself up for the most natural birth possible. And then when the actual birth started, something else happened. Your body did something else. So have you ever felt that your body was at war with you? On mute first, please, Sabina. Sabina, unmute. Thank you.
Well, interesting, I never had that idea because from an early age on, I actually knew that I really understood my body, and that if something goes on within my body, it's something that can be solved. It's not something I have to go to war at. But I remember when I had Lyme disease, people would say, you have to fight it. Other people said, you know, I had Lyme disease too, but I was fighting it. And that whole approach of fighting something that is actually within me, that's part of me, somehow never made sense to me. So I didn't really have the feeling my body is at war. I just have often the feeling something my body wants is in some major transformation. And my body is working through stuff. It's a process. So yes, that's I definitely felt, but not so much war.
So that's very interesting what you said. And so this was almost something that you had already within you, that you already knew. You were not at least contaminated by the idea of the outside world.
You know, I think I mentioned to you that when I was young, my first 19 years living in Germany, I was always sick. But somehow I knew there must be another way. It was my mom would send me to doctors and never really helped, or it was just temporarily. But somehow my instinct told me there is another way. There's something out there. I always knew there's something more out there than what I'm seeing, what I'm experiencing. And I had this since I'm a child. I always knew that can be it. This life I was leading in Germany, there's more out there. So I always was searching for, what's out there, and ultimately what's within me that has led me searching out there over many years, and ultimately looking within. And that's where really the answers came from, within. And I truly believe life is an inside job.
Yes, indeed. Life is an inside job. Phil, I'm bringing you back in. So, Phil, as you look back on some of the issues you've faced yourself, I know there was some oral stuff going on. I want you to think about this, what I'm going to put up on the screen here right now. And it's about self-care, and it's not coming up. So let me just see if I can get this up. And if not, so we're talking today about illness. Is illness a lack of self-care? Is that what creates illness? What do you think about that? Or lack of knowledge about self-care?
I think there's a real lack of knowledge. I think there's a very strong programming going on against self-care, actually, because it wasn't really my remit growing up. It just, we didn't, looking at that, we didn't drink. I didn't understand about my piece, staying moisturized. Now I know staying moisturized is an inside job, right? Hydration is an inside job. Minding your own business, it's in your mind, it's an inside job. Protecting my peace, my mind protects my peace. And I think that's very powerful, really. It's about, I like the saying, actually, that there's 3 types of business. There's my business. There's God's business, your business, and my business. So mind your own business. And that's crucial. We have to mind our own business. And it's definitely an inside job. I think it's a lack of awareness, lack of education. And for most people now, it's such a massive task because we're so far down a certain path of self-destruct and not self-care that it's such a challenge for people to, I'm going to stop myself there. It's such a challenge for people to take it on and believe people like us.
So, Phil, do you think, therefore, then, that most people, when we mention the word self-care, they think it's being very privileged and it's self-absorbed, and that our bodies should just do what we want to do without, what we want, and allow us to do what we want without having any repercussions? Do you think that that's part of the issue, maybe?
Yeah, definitely. Because I know when I was growing up and I was in construction, and the older guys would be like, Phil, you need to wear a mask, or you need to wear goggles, or you need to wear ear defenders. And I'm like, why? My body heals itself. And a lot of that, I think, construction and other jobs like that, you cut yourself, which I've done numerous times, and the body heals. I mean, it really is miraculous. So, I was under the complete delusion, whichever you'd like to call it, that the body healed itself. Didn't matter what I did to it, it healed. And it's only when I got sick and the body failed to heal itself that it was like, oh, it really does matter what I put on my mouth, up my nose, in my eyes, in my ears. Everything matters and there's a consequence. Or you could say karma, right? Karma is, for every action, there's a reaction. And it's really simple. If you're putting toxic, deadly things in an opening, there's a consequence to that. And I was hell-bent on the fact that my body could just heal itself. And also, I think partly that's because when we're young, we're full of stem cells, we're full of enzymes, and we have that ability to heal, most of us, almost, no matter what. As we get older, stem cell production reduces, or the stem cells go dormant because of the lack of the peptide that activates the stem cells. And we have an enzyme pool that becomes depleted. And once an amount of stem cells become dormant and the enzyme pool is empty, old age is the way that we're going.
And Phil, what I have noticed as well is that it's not just when we are a certain age or younger, it's actually happening a lot to teenagers now. They've got the depletion of their stem cells and of their enzymes because they never had the start where they could have actually created them in their own bodies. So I say all illness begins in pregnancy and continues throughout the birthing and the way we raise the children and what we do with the children, what we say around children, what they hear, what they see us doing, and how they actually respond to us being out of control. Herb, you have a child. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on. Can you hear me clearly, by the way? So my microphone's a little bit far. Hold in my hand. Is this okay?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Cool. Yes, I became very aware because through my own illnesses and dis-ease, and once I learned and discovered what contributed to that, you know, I knew full well that my mother's diet wasn't the greatest. I was never breastfed as a child, and with this awareness and knowing how my life played out, being addicted to processed food, junk food, I didn't eat any fruit or vegetables growing up until my adult years, and making that connection to it being a detriment to my health. When my son come along, the first thing I was adamant about was him to be breastfed, was him to be as clean and pure as possible to preserve his health and innocence. So that meant, no vaccines, no jabs. And this was quite, I received quite a bit of a pushback. My partner at the time, she was kind of uncertain because this was kind of radical, really. You're going against all what society tells us and conditions us. But I had this drive and this determination, this knowing that the world that we live in is a lie, and we take care of ourselves by abiding by the laws of nature, nourishing ourselves with good food, clean air, clean water, being out connected with nature. It's quite a big change in the home. Even the TV went out because it's like, well, there's no need for this. We can go outside and enjoy and play. So yeah, that was really, really important, not just for me, but for as a family, as a unit. And yeah, he was very, very healthy growing up. There was no issue with him eating what I provided for him, all fresh, wonderful produce. It was not an issue. Children love and are drawn to natural foods, to fruit and vegetables. It's when we become contaminated and have our senses tampered with, hampered, is when there's an issue. Because I knew how hard it was and how much of a struggle it was for me to eat healthy. And yeah, bringing up a child from scratch was beautiful. I remember going to children's parties. My boy would be invited, and I'd be a little bit concerned because I knew everywhere else would be provided of the traditional party food or the processed food. We'd bring our own stuff, but there'd be also carrot sticks, cucumbers, grapes, things like this there. And literally, my boy was the only one to go to the table and just eat the cucumbers and the carrot sticks. He'd turn a blind eye, wouldn't take any notice to all the other stuff, the processed food. And everyone was amazed. They're like, wow, how is he doing this? Why is he not attracted to this? And it's purely how we start. Being an example, setting an example.
So I think it's interesting that you said that your partner said thought it was sacrilegious to go against what society tells us to do. But what I find about that interesting is that society doesn't think that it's sacrilegious to go against nature, and we are nature. And that's what illness teaches us, that we are part of nature and we're going against the rules and the laws of nature. Also, I must tell you, I'm still processing that you said that as a child, you didn't have any vegetables or fruits at all. There had to be something.
Nothing. Honestly, I was literally lived on processed. Maybe when I was 2 years old, 3 years old, I had some vegetables, but no. My mum tells me when I started school from a very young age, before that, yeah, just went completely off, and certain things happened in life, certain traumas where I formed an addiction and comfort with processed food. I wouldn't go anywhere near fruit and vegetables. I detested it. The closest I got to a vegetable was a potato chip. That was it. And if I was served a roast dinner or something, that was considered the healthiest thing at the time. If just one pea touched a potato, I'd cut the potato in half and discard the other half and eat the bit that wasn't contaminated. That's how bad it was. and this is why I always preach and go on about the oneness of fruit, because if I can do it, if I can overcome that, everyone else can. You know, I was the biggest addict you would know and think of. Honestly, it is a complete difference from here to then.
However, you had an invitation to change, didn't you?
Yeah, which come through suffering, which we've touched
You
on.
became sick. You became very sick. Tell us
Mm.
about that. How did you come to the realization that you're part of nature and that you are going against nature?
Oh, that's a great question. It's come in stages, because I thought I was aligned with nature because before I fell really ill, I mentioned this quite a few times on the stream, that I had chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia. And growing up, I was never fit, never athletic whatsoever. I was always picked last at school for PE or in the football team. I'd never get chosen because I just have no energy, no vitality whatsoever. But before I fell ill with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, I thought I lived the healthiest lifestyle that mainstream advised us. You know, it's all kind of whole foods. I managed to ditch most of the processed food. It was all like organic, grass-fed, you know, all this happy so-called cow stuff. It doesn't exist. And, you know, I was working like 50 plus hours a week, my own business and strength training as well. But I couldn't maintain that. And obviously the body just come crashing down. You think all the years of accumulation of the toxins, acids, and what I'm missing out on all had a huge effect. And when I was bedridden for a few weeks, you know, I'm looking for answers, and then I was drawn to really come from a place of compassion, drawn to going vegan, making that connection with the animals. And I literally genuinely thought at that time that if I went vegan, I'm going to be missing out on essential nutrients. You know, protein's a big thing that gets touted everywhere. And I thought, what have I got to lose? You know, my health's bad enough it is. I'm going to do this for animals. And lo and behold, within like a few months, I started to feel better. I started eating more fruit. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this stream, that I was seeing other people making a difference to their lives and sharing their story of what living on fruit did for them. And so I started eating lots of bananas and then got on the bike. And then within a few years, I become this like super duper endurance athlete no one would ever imagined. And then from that, went through another event in life where that will come crashing down. I had really bad injury, went into major depression, was in a really dark place. And from that point, with the really bad injuries I had, I was lured and drawn towards being raw vegan, fruitarian, because I was getting no help from any medical expert whatsoever. So that was an invitation, a journey of self-discovery and inquiry. And again, I was drawn to these beautiful beings projecting this beautiful frequency of health, love, vitality. You can just see it oozing from them. And yeah, I trusted, like Sabina mentioned, is a opportunity to listen to ourselves, to turn inwards. And I had no faith or trust in what I was being taught and told. I saw the lies, I saw the joke of it all, basically, and went on my own path on my own. And then, yeah, dived on the fruit. And when I lived a watermelon for a month, I remember within 2 weeks, I bounced out of bed full of joy and energy for the first time in my life. And I always struggled getting up. And that was just like one of the many light bulb effects that come on. I was like, yeah, there's no way I'm going back ever to eating the way I was before. Even, you know, vegan is great. It's a great start, but the processed food, the breads and things like that, it doesn't serve us in the long term.
So I think it's really interesting that you said the medical experts were no help. Well, I think that's because they were medical experts, not health experts. So they deal in disease and illness. That's what they're experts in, not to help you to heal or not to get healthy, but to stay in the illness and the disease. That's how I see it. Thanks so much for telling us. Because of that, I'm going to jump to Sabina, because Sabina, you have a very similar upbringing to Herb, with the shocking no vegetables, no fruit. Could you tell us how you escaped that and what brought you out of that phase? And you need to unmute first, please, Sabina. Thanks.
So I was 19 years on a standard German diet, which is usually bread in the morning, bread with butter and marmalade, and some juice out of a box that's pasteurized with sugar. It was my breakfast. For lunch, we always had meat because my father was a notorious meat eater. So it was a meat, usually potatoes or French fries. And at night, we would have sausage and bread. So that was kind of the average diet. And yes, we did have fruit, but we had it after the meal, which is probably the worst way to ever eat fruit. So after the meat and the potato, we had some fruit afterwards. So I was always sick. I mean, like I was sick in every month. I would be in bed with terrible bronchitis and coughing and flu, like mucus coming out. I couldn't even breathe. Like I had really severe symptoms. And interestingly, everyone else in my family ate the same thing, but they were not as sick as I was. I was always wondering why me. But in the end, it was a good thing because it got me to the point when I was 19, I left my family and I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I was committed to experience health, not just health, like vibrant health and vitality and energy. I wanted all these things. And that was a long time ago. It was in the 80s, ways before the internet. So I went to the bookstore and looked around, and there was one book that was on the raw food lifestyle and fasting and food combining. And I devoured the book and I said, okay, this feels right. Let's just do it. And that was, no one in my whole field was even close to that. So I was kind of the weirdo. So I dived fully in that, and I noticed within a month, like my nose would suddenly be so clear, I could actually breathe. My whole life, I was a mouth breather. I couldn't breathe through my nose, and I could only go to the bathroom every 3 days. I was constantly constipated. I was skinny, but I had always this big belly. Like people thought I'm pregnant. Like serious, like this huge belly, bloating and gas and like all these terrible symptoms. So within a month, I noticed a change in 1 month. And that was really the catalyst that made me realize, wow, I have the power to heal myself. I have a power to make the difference in my life that no one taught me, and none of the doctors didn't know that. And it was so simple, just changing the way I eat. And that was the beginning of my journey. And then I went, diving deep into meditation and yoga and all kinds of spiritual modalities and personal development. So that really got me ignited. See, what else is possible? If I can do this, what else is possible? So that was the beginning of my journey, and I haven't stopped ever since.
Thank you for this, Sabina. So you mentioned, Sabina, that your family were eating this way and you were the only one that was ill. They were not ill themselves. However, is this really true? Were they emotionally and mentally healthy? Because health is on every aspect. It's or emotional and or mental health that's at risk to. It might not come through physically, but it manifests itself in many different ways. Would you say that emotionally and mentally they were? I'm specifically thinking about your father and the way he responded to just yourself.
Well, there was actually a lot of dysfunction, which I didn't see at that time because it seemed normal. It's normal. The man screams around the house and tells the women what to do. And it's normal. Doors are slamming and things are flying. And from the outside, it all looked very good. My father was actually a well-recognized architect in our area. So it looked really good. We had horses and a farm, and my parents were part of the horse riding club in the city. So I was actually known. I go to a store and people, you're the daughter of architect Kurt. So, it all looked very good from the outside, but later when I really dived into emotional healing and shadow work, I realized there was so much dysfunction. I actually come from a dysfunctional family. It was a huge realization. There was a lot of emotional stuff. My parents were always arguing, a lot of drama, my mom crying, my dad screaming, my sister and I, we got locked in the room, we were beaten. I mean, there was a lot of stuff, which was not okay. So no, it was actually a very unhealthy environment, very dysfunctional. My mom passed young. My dad, he got to 88, but there was a lot of stuff he suppressed. And my sister's younger than me, but she doesn't have any close the energy that I have. And she doesn't do all the things that I do. So now it's showing up because on my cousins who are younger, they start to all have health issues. My sister has a little health issues. So no one is really, my entire family is really so-called healthy. And I wish I'd say I had perfect health, which is not true. But, I know when something comes up, I actually know how to move through it and how to heal it myself without needing any expert on the side. So that is something that I have learned through all these years, learning how to approach all my conditions and actually how to release them one by one, especially the emotional part, which was so much harder. The physical aspect was actually easy compared to all that trauma and all these beliefs I was holding, that like in our household, it was not okay to talk about emotions. So everything was suppressed. Anger had to be suppressed, sadness. And I had so much boiled up after the years that I mentioned once already. Sometimes I would have fights with my boyfriends and things were flying, objects were flying in the room. And we had the police at the house several times because the neighbors called. It looks like someone is being murdered, or it sounds like. So the police came to the house. And that was really the moment I realized I got to do something. It can't go on like that. But it was all part of these suppressed emotions going back to childhood. And it was just normal in my household that these emotions were suppressed, or they were just, what's the word? And not suppressed, they were spilled out through the screaming or the crying. So it was a very unhealthy way of processing emotions. And when I learned that actually there's a healthy way to channel emotions and actually use the anger in a productive way, that was the total game changer. So that's when my life really shifted, when I learned how to actually work with these emotions that were bottled up within me for so many years. And that was a beautiful journey.
Yes, thank you for that. Therein lies the illness. It doesn't have to manifest in the bodies. And we don't know what's going on in other people's bodies. Their liver, the source of all these emotions, was probably extremely ill and diseased. And they were acting from a diseased place. So we can never tell, even if they're not in a hospital, where there's chaos, where there is a lot of drugs. And to me, anger is a drug. It's one of the things that I think is not talked about much. And actually, next week, we're going to be dealing with anger. So with this, I'm going to bring in Pete. Pete, how do you see yourself in the full spectrum of all the different changes in your own life? Because Sabina just mentioned that she doesn't have perfect health. None of us do, which is why this live stream is not called Be Healthy, it's called Being, because it's a process.
Okay, so you give me that question again, because it went off a little bit.
So it's not really a question. I want you to comment on the fact that that health, we don't achieve health and then that's the end of it. It doesn't stay. It's a process. It's not something you attain and you keep. It's a constant unfolding.
Sure, yeah, and beautiful stories, everyone. Yeah, it's constant. I mean, we'd be so silly to say we are there or we are in perfect health. Personally, that's what I would class as not very clever to say. It's an ongoing journey, and especially for us, potentially, of the people who have gone on that journey, it's because there's been a major story. And for me, 18 years ago, I would say, my organs and my body would have been riddled if I had gone down a medical route, and I would have been diagnosed with many labels, I'm just going to call them. So good that I had other awareness and just followed a more instinctual part of myself and followed a route that really bettered me and served me more. And it was cutting out of all the nonsense. it's interesting. Around 30, I gave up what they class as flesh, the animal nonsense, and that was due to some new friends. I moved down Brighton, new friends I met, and they would just gently say, "Well, you know, why are you eating that?" You know, and all I would generally have would be the anyway, last bit of something in the fridge, and so. And I didn't miss it, and it didn't make sense, especially when they expressed a few things around that. So, you know, thank you, Darren Green, and they were my didgeridoo days. Actually, and there's a lot of breath work I was doing. 4 years constant of this didgeridoo and drum, but more the didge. So breath work, I realized I was doing a lot of breath work, which the intuition would be coming through stronger. It's, you know, I certified in breath work many years before that. So I would be able to continue the breath, the ditch, continue the circle of breathing. And I was using it as a tool to continue working through, witnessing the emotions coming through and different stories. And so it was really felt like it was unblocking my whole meridian system, you know, and any stagnant energy, shock, memory left in my cellular memory, cells, should I say. So that was really amazing. So, and yeah, so a lot has been said. So in terms of, you know, we'd be here for about 4 hours if I started sharing some of my stories. It's very close to Sabina's. And what you touched on, Doreet, was, which over years I've wrote so many bits down, and I've alerted to that same theory, the root, and done metaphors on my old Pete Slash, simply raw, just because people won't really get it and we get so triggered, is us in the womb, but us before we even conceive, you know. So we, you know, we can talk about many other things, and we all have beautiful stories. But if our roots aren't strong, if we haven't really gone into the roots, should I say, and cleared out the nonsense, then they, you know, they're brittle, and the trees, we're just going to break. So really have to go deeper into the core essence. Yes, in birth, the field, the environment, but how were we? You know, before we conceived, was it the best seed? Was it the best earth? Was you a good farmer? You know, etc., etc. So, you know, I'm gonna stay on that level, because, you know, we avoid that like Herb was avoiding the pea off the potato. So and so we all know on a level. So somewhere subconsciously we know. So it's just getting more in tune with your subconscious self, with part of yourself, or the program part of yourself. But we only got a minute there anyway, so that's my bit.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And just in the nick of time too, because we do need to go. Thanks very much for that, Pete. So everyone, next week, join us as we look at anger and how does it fit in to being healthy. Thanks for all your patience, everyone, today with the internet, my internet issues, and see you all next week. Same place, same time.